Are you a creative clutterbug? You're not on your own. Today we are talking to the lovely Marianne Slater. She's a floral designer and self-confessed stuff addict, but she's making fantastic strides on her decluttering journey. And today she's going to share her secret.
You're listening to the Declutter Hub podcast, bringing you tried and tested, no-nonsense tips and advice from the leading experts in decluttering and organising your home. Now here's your host, Leslie Spellman.
This podcast episode is sponsored by the Clean and Tidy Home Show. The Clean and Tidy Home Show takes place at Excel London on the 8th and 9th of October 2022, and everyone is welcome. Visit to get all the tips, tricks, tools, and motivation you need to clean, organise, and take control of your home. Go to cleanandtidyhomeshow.com for more information and to buy tickets. We'll be there, and we hope you will too. Hello and welcome listeners to episode 198. I'm Leslie. If you're new to the Declutter Hub podcast, you're very, very welcome. What you'll find here is reality, empathy and advice by the bucket load. Some of you will binge the podcast and others will take your time, but our aim is that you learn, be motivated and become excited to start or continue your decluttering journey with our podcast in your ear. Now, I am very excited, always excited, but very, very excited today to chat to one of our members, Marianne. Every member has a different story to tell, and there are a couple of things that stood out to me when seeing Marianne's journey unfold. So firstly, she's young compared to me and recognises that some of her traits were there from a very early age. And secondly, she is super creative, and we all know that often creativity and clutter go hand in hand. Now, Marianne has created a workshop for her floral business that made all our members swoon when we saw the photos in our forum. Later in the podcast, we're going to talk all about that workshop project and how she made it happen. But first of all, we're going to delve into Marianne's early life. Welcome, Marianne.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see Marianne's beautiful floral displays behind her. It looks gorgeous. It's so nice to see you. And thank you for deciding to be on YouTube as well, Marianne, and to go public, go on video. As I said, that's probably because you're young and lovely. So tell us a little bit about, not that young actually, but tell us a little bit about your early life and your upbringing and what made you into a stuff addict. Your words, not mine.
Stuff addict. Yes, I did use that, didn't I? I've just always been a creative person, and I grew up in a lovely house in the countryside, and it's a big enough house to have lots of things, so that's what I had. I collected paper and pencils and anything I could get my hands on to be creative with was sort of where it all started. And I was always encouraged to do that because my parents are both really creative, and anything I wanted to do, was always encouraged. So the house was always not full. I don't want to do disservice to my parents because they, obviously kept a lovely home, but there were always projects, there were always little bits here and there. And I think my mother and I definitely tend to be quite sentimental people as well. So that's a whole other story, isn't it? Being sentimental, but yeah. Yes. So I grew up here, which is where my studio is.
So before we go on, Marianne, you talk about growing up in the countryside. Whereabouts is your countryside? Where do you come from?
We're in the north of England, Peak District in Derbyshire, if people know that. Very near Bakewell and Chatsworth House and the Plague Village of Eam. Yeah, sort of that part of the world.
You say the Plague Village of Eam, which sounds quite, it just sounds quite dark, which it is. But honestly, Year of Wonders, which was set in Eam, is one of my favourite ever books. Now we're going off track here, but if nobody's read it, if you haven't read Year of Wonders, it's set in Eam, which is really close to where Marianne's from. It's a fabulous, fabulous book. But I digress, as always, Marianne. So tell us a little bit more. So you grew up in an idyllic part of the Peak District in England with your mum and dad.
Yeah, and then I went to school nearby. I went to college to study art, surprise, surprise. And then I ended up going to university in Leeds, also to study art. So yeah, and that's when the clutter really began to build up, because I had so many projects I was doing. There were all these resources that I wanted to work on, and when you live in a tiny house share, or well, halls at the beginning and then in a few house shares, and you have one bedroom, and I was used to just, having my stuff all over my parents' house if I wanted it to, or I could go out in the garden, or I could do what I wanted. And now I was confined to this quite small rooms. If you've seen a student house, you know that it's not exactly the lap of luxury. And yeah, I ended up just filling all rooms to the rafters. And I was known as the messy one with my friends. And, people would come in my room and go, oh God, what's going on in here? Like, it looks like a bomb's gone off. And I would just sort of pass it away as like, well, I'm an art student, I'm creative, this is what it's got to be like. But I think that's probably the first time I started to realize, like, oh, I've got a bit of a stuff problem, because it was just coming in. Nothing went out. I would, you could give me a train ticket and I'd be like, ooh, a memory. Could be for a project. I mean, I did do an art project based on train tickets once, because, it's an interesting subject. So yeah, it all just got very out of hand at university, to be honest.
So you say that you were known as the messy person. So do you think that that's the first time that the realization hit you that actually not everybody lived in this way, and not everybody had an accumulation of stuff along the way?
I think it's been a very long journey into realizing that part of it. I think I felt embarrassed. I think that's the first thing I started to feel, like there was a bit of a shame around it. Like maybe I did realize, because I felt like I was different.
I felt like you were different, right?
Yeah. And I felt like other people don't lose things in their bedrooms. They know where all their stuff is. But I think not until a lot later did I realize that other people are like me, and there are other people who just don't have any issues with stuff. I don't think I ever realized that until a bit later, particularly because of growing up. I lived in a house with stuff, so it wasn't like I'd come out of my family home and then all of a sudden I had a problem. It was just how I'd always lived. So yeah, and then my other half is from a similar family, and also I would say is messier than me. He'll kill me for saying that. He's worse than me. So, both of us together, I think I'd just always seen it as like, oh, people have stuff, that's not a problem. And then when the friends started to comment, I realized, oh, maybe it's not like normal. And then, yeah.
So you were at uni, that's the first time that you realised that you might have more stuff than other people, let's call it that. But you're not going to have that realisation at such a young age. This is going to be something that you're gradually going to work out over the years. So did you move back home again after uni, or did you move in with your partner?
Moved home, took one car to move me in first year, took 4 or 5 carloads to move me out, like back and forth, right? Because of the amount of stuff I'd got. And then I lived at home for 2 or 3 years whilst we saved up to buy a house, and then we moved in together. So yeah.
And the kind of stuff that you brought back from uni, Marianne, was it, so you talked a lot about the stuff for projects, for creative projects and things like that, which is kind of a byproduct then of being creative, really, that we always see a projects and everything. Was there other stuff as well, or was it just art stuff?
No, it was clothes, books. I love books, shoes, just, all your classic things, makeup. Yeah, I just everything that you kind of have in life. I had multiples of all of it. The clothes was particularly bad because, I struggled to sort of find what my style was, which I think is a whole other thing about some of the decluttering stuff, but struggled with that. So I just would buy clothes. Yeah, so I just had everything. I had bags and bags of everything. And then fitting it back into my bedroom at home was a bit of a...
Yeah, and I know you're an avid podcast listener, Marianne, so you will have listened to podcasts where I've spoke to my children, or we've talked about empty nesting and the fact that of kids moving out. So when you eventually moved out, so presumably you got a house eventually with your boyfriend, and then you moved out of home. Did you bring your stuff with you, or did you leave it behind like most kids do?
My parents would say I left it all behind, but I don't feel like I did. I was very excited to move out, obviously. It was our first time living together. We bought a house. It was very exciting. So I treated it like I was moving out properly. You know, I did try and pack everything up. I didn't declutter a single thing, really. I just packed it all up and took it with me. And yeah, I did leave some stuff. And yes, there is probably still some stuff here, but I think that's sort of the blurry line between that I actually work here now and, you know, and a lot of the stuff that I did leave here ended up being art stuff. But my my other half turned up to our house move with a bag for life with just some bits in, because he knew he could. We've not moved far from our parents' homes, and I think he knew he could just take it in dribs and drabs. So you know, I think I did obviously leave some bits here, but I tried to move it all. But that's another thing that I didn't realize would fill the house up quite as much. You know, I think when you move properly move house, when you move from one house and it has to be completely empty and you have to move to another house, like in a chain, you have to get everything gone, don't you? You can't just leave some stuff. And I think that's one of the ways in which our house got full, because we could, you know, oh, let's just take this, and people giving us stuff. That was the other thing. I think as a young person, as you're calling me, when you buy a new house, every single person wants to give you their old sofa or their old dresser, and you're like, oh yeah, I'll have that because it's free or cheap at least. And then you end up with a whole house full of mismatched stuff that doesn't actually fit anywhere. That was a fun adventure.
So when did you decide? So we keep talking about the fact that you're young, Marianne. Come clean and tell us how young you are so people can put you in context. How many years ago is this? It's just you're not really that young. It's just compared to me. Feeling old today.
I am 32, which doesn't feel that young, but I know it is compared to your mum. People. Yeah. But
yeah. Exactly.
I'm not 20 anymore.
No, exactly. So when did you decide that you wanted to actually declutter?
Oh, I think when we got the house and I just saw the boxes everywhere, I felt like and started to realise we've not got a huge house. It's a little terraced, 2 up, 2 down type scenario. It's lovely, but it's not huge. I just thought we've not got the storage for this, so I need to get rid of some stuff. But my version of getting rid of stuff was just sort of hiding it in boxes and putting it away, rather than, and not putting it away in an organised manner. Like nothing went together. It was all just shoved in boxes. So properly getting down to some decluttering was probably 2 or 3 years ago, and I started to read some books. I think it was the Marie Kondo stuff that quite interested me. So I've read her book. I've read some other things. So I read the book The Life Laundry, which was a series back in the noughties, I think.
Yeah, it was on the TV back in the noughties. I remember watching that with, I think her name's Dana or something like that. Yeah.
And there were 2 little companion books that went with the series. So I've got those, and it all made sense to me, but I wasn't doing it. It's that sort of, I can read the diet book, but I actually have to stop eating crisps. It's that. Yeah. It's that, isn't it?
Reading the book doesn't fix the problem. No, it's the problem. You've got to take action and accountability and that kind of thing. And that's because the books are fantastic, and they've all got different ways of doing things and everything, but it is taking those next steps from the book where a lot of people really struggle. So you read the books, did a little bit of decluttering. How successful were you? Medium. I think I like to be organized in a lot of aspects with my business. I'm very organized, and the house was not organized. So I think the most I got out of those things was
organizing. So this sort of putting like with like as much as I could. So it was like the things I sorted out were like the sock drawer, and I maybe categorize things in the wardrobe and put all the books in the same place. But there wasn't a lot of exiting the house, not a lot of stuff was actually going out. It was more putting all my massive collections of things together.
So it was more organizing rather than decluttering. That's the thing. And that's something that happens to a lot of people, actually, Marianne, is that, and of course it looks better, sort of organizing your stuff always makes it look better than when it's chaotic, even if stuff is not exited and we feel accomplished by just organizing it. But then it gets to a stage where we really do have to lose some stuff so that we can then find a proper home for things. It's interesting, you were talking before about the boxes and putting things and not really finding a home for them, but it's finding a space for them. So what you were doing is kind of finding a space for the stuff that you had, but you weren't really finding its ultimate home, if that makes sense. And that's the difference. And so, again, it's organizing. It's all about organizing. It's understanding that difference really between decluttering and organizing and tidying, which we go back to a lot in the Declutter Hub, which is super important. And it all gets kind of muddled around in a lot of people's minds as to what that is, because if you're not doing it and if you've not gone through that process of understanding all the different components, we can spend more time doing other things. We can tidy up, make things look nice, we can do organizing, but actually sometimes we just need to get down to the nitty gritty and do some decluttering. So that's the bit that probably was missing, taking that action or knowing how to do that. And then I believe you found the Declutter Hub. I
did. So my wonderful auntie has been a member with you for a while, and she was sort of poking my mum with lots of your information, and because they're sisters, very close, and she'd say, I've done this, and I think she maybe won one of the ABs, like the A to Z challenges or something, and she was just really proud of herself, and we would hear about it a lot. Marilyn would tell us a lot of really amazing things about it. And so my mum had started listening to the podcast, and she was saying, oh, you should really listen to this. Oh, you should, I think you'd really enjoy it. And in sort of classic child, I was like, I'm fine. Don't bother me with this stuff. And then it was one day when I think we were doing something in here, and she said, let me just put this episode on. I think it was the one with Jill.
Okay.
And I think it really resonated with my mum, and she was like, you'll just listen to it, you'll love it. And I listened to it and I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. And I completely rinsed the entire Declutter Hub podcast within a month or so. I listened to every episode there was, and then I was waiting, like Friday morning would come, the new episode would come, I would listen to it. Like that's how it is now. That is my life now. So yeah, I just got so much from that podcast. It was like finally someone's actually sort of speaking my language. Oh, I'm not the only one. I'm not a complete anomaly, and there's nothing wrong with me. This is just some people struggle with clutter. And then it was the sort of, I think the emotional part, that's a huge thing, is that all the books I'd read, they don't really talk a lot about the emotions, and I'm quite obviously an emotion driven person, and it was like identifying when you'd say that's an aspirational thing, that's that's memories, all these little, like the light bulbs, you say light bulbs, the light bulbs were going on. I was like, oh, that's why I like collecting those things, because I've got an aspiration that one day I'll do something with them. And every episode was like some nugget. And I would even listen to the ones like sorting kids' toys. I don't have children, but there's always a nugget. That was what I was like, there's always a nugget in there of something. I'm like, oh, yes, of course. So yeah, it just went from 0 to 100 on my radar of importance. And then I did the house. I just went for it. It was life-changing, actually. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm delighted. So just to jump back a little bit, Marianne, the podcast that you're talking about is the one with Jill, who was one of my former clients, now a member, who is a big crafter. So she's a self-confessed kind of hoarding tendencies crafter. So she talks all about why she has too much, probably still too much, and she would be happy for me to say that, craft stuff and the kind of emotions that sit behind that. So it is quite a good podcast to listen to if you want to understand. If you're a creative person, it's a brilliant one for those emotions to kind of resonate with you. And I think that's it. Now, after listening to all those podcasts, we're about, forget about the stuff for now. Don't worry about the stuff. We're all about the emotions. And then once you understand those emotions and see those traits, those habits in yourself, then you can start to make inroads into the stuff. But the one comes before the other. And I think that's where a lot of decluttering programs, it's not that the decluttering programs fall down, but we kind of cling on to the bit that we want, which is the tidy drawer. Do you know what I mean? And we don't, we want the tidy drawer. It's more exciting and more fun to fold knickers than it is to actually think about why we've got 120 pairs of them. Do you know what I mean? And so it's things like that, really. So that's where we're all about. So we're all about realism. So I'm delighted that you binged the podcast. I said right at the beginning of this episode, a lot of people love to binge. Like once they've started, they never stop. And then a lot of people just take it one podcast at a time, whichever way it suits us. But the podcasts are a brilliant, brilliant way to start. So you did your whole house after the podcast, and then you became a member, didn't you?
Yeah, I got gifted my membership as my birthday present last year. It was the best birthday present ever. And it just made me realise, like, you go into the community area. I mean, I'm a bit of a lurker. I'm not a massive poster, but just knowing you're not alone. I don't know, and it's sort of like therapy, but for cluttered people. And one thing I really, really like about everything you do is it's not, and this has been a big unlearning curve for me, it's not about being perfect. It's just about being slightly better, or even hitting a goal that you want to achieve, rather than when you see everyone on Instagram, because I'm obviously have a lot of presence on Instagram, and I see people with their house transformations and all of this, and it's quite depressing, actually, when you're like, my house is never going to look like that because I've got all this stuff. And actually you and the members and everything they post, it's just normal houses. It's just normal people in normal houses who just want to sort out a bedside table, or it might be a big room of doom, but it's not about perfection. And I think that was really what grabbed me massively about the membership area. We're all struggling, and we don't have to show up perfectly to matter. I think that's a big thing.
Yes, it's so important, because would it be nice to have an Instagram perfect home? Maybe. Can we create that sometimes? Yes. I don't have a cluttered home, but I still have to tidy up before I put something on Instagram. Do you know what I mean? Because that's what people would expect from me. Do you know what I mean? So it's just, I don't know. It's an interesting one. So when we were talking about the kind of emotions, and we spoke about this before we started recording, you talked a lot about the fact that you had a lot of emotions that were like layered on top of each other. Mm-hmm. So perfectionism of yourself, we've talked about an insta perfect home, then let's call it that. But do you think that you suffer from perfectionism yourself?
Absolutely. I'd say it's like number one of my traits as a human. I think I was listening to the podcast with Penelope, the member, you did it a while ago with Penelope, and she was saying, and it really resonated with me, that I feel like everything must be perfect. And when it's not perfect and it's a mess, why should I even start? Like that's, and it's always been like that with a lot of things. And I think the perfectionism leads into some control issues I have around delegating to other people, asking for help, and just letting someone else do something. I'll even, if someone offers to cook me dinner, I'm there sort of going, I wouldn't chop the onion like that. And I have to be like, no, it's not up to me. Not everything is on me to do. So the perfectionism feeds into that. The control stuff means I don't ask for help. and then I just get really overwhelmed. So I think they're all my emotions. There's some frustration in there. I definitely get frustrated with myself because things aren't perfect. I get frustrated with other people because things aren't perfect. So I'm really trying hard to just stop expecting perfection. Like, okay is fine, and it's never going to stay perfect, even if you make it look nice. Like, we all know that you tidy something and about 5 minutes later it just looks lived in.
I think now that you're talking about it, Marianne, I think it's very difficult because perfectionism as a floral designer is what is expected. And so in that area of your life, perfectionism and control, and to a point, it's hard to delegate your baby as well to somebody else when you've got your own business. And so these are traits that serve you very well in your business, because who wants a kind of, you know, an unruly bunch of flowers, you know, to put it, you know, we want it to be perfect and it has to be perfect. And that's what people are paying for. But it's trying to separate that out from other areas of your life, I guess. Like, I can be perfect. You know, Ingrid and I will always say, you know, we're good at this kind of stuff, but we're not creative. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, yes, we're really good at being organized people and understanding people's emotions, but we're not creative people. We can't craft. If you wanted us to put a bunch of flowers in a vase, we'd struggle with that massively. Do you know what I mean? And so it's knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at, and where perfectionism, where it needs to stop in certain parts of your life, but it needs to come to the fore in other parts of your life. So it's not bad to be a perfectionist, because that serves you well, but it's just knowing that perhaps that's not going to serve you well when it comes to managing your home. So you've talked about sentimentality as well throughout this podcast. Do you feel like you're a sentimental person?
Yeah, very much. I mean, I've got rocks that my other half gave me from a holiday 7 years ago. I just can't. Getting rid of stuff is really hard, and I just see. I see sort of. I'm quite emotional about usefulness as well in some weird ways. So it's those two things. Something has potential to be useful, but it's also maybe got some memories or emotions in it, and that is just a recipe for disaster for me, you know. So yeah, and I've tried really hard to. I think one of the great lessons from the Declutter Hub is that sort of, you can have the stuff or you can have the space, and it's just weighing up with every item. Do my emotions towards this item or its usefulness, do they actually usefulness, future usefulness, aspirational usefulness, are they worth the space it's taking up? And, you know, it's sort of weighing up object by object. That little equation to me has sort of changed a lot of things. So now I'm like, well, yes, I'll keep some of the rocks, but I don't need to keep all the rocks. Like, I found a few and I was like, I have no idea what holiday these are even from, but, you know, he must have given them me, and I would have gone, oh, pretty rocks, and put them in my pocket, and then they end up in a jar somewhere, and they can go out in the garden, you know, they can be gone because I don't actually have a memory of them. I've just sort of fortified a memory around them. But then I do have a rock in the bathroom, which has got just naturally a little heart shape in it, and my partner found it for me and gave it me, and I'm keeping that rock. So that's worth the space because I can remember where he got it. It looks nice and it lives there, and that's fine. But yeah, it's sort of the space versus the stuff is the huge.
Yeah, exactly. Space versus stuff, quality over quantity, you know, all of those kind of things. And I think you're so right that this is all about compromise, you know. So if you have too much stuff, which most people in our Declutter Hub community, whatever that community is, whether that's on the Facebook group, the podcast listeners, the membership, or people that read what we write, I think that we know that there are decisions to be made about stuff, but we've got too much. And so we have to make hard decisions. We have to push ourselves out of our comfort zone and make decisions that are not simple decisions. We have to go a little bit deeper on those emotions and understand them. So we're going to go to the break now. And then after the break, we're going to talk about your lovely workshop project, which is what we saw in our forum. And we were all like, oh, wow. All the members were like, that's amazing, as a before and after picture. And I know that so many people would be super interested because it is a creative space. So we're going to go for a little break now. I'll be back in a minute.
Do you listen to our podcast week after week and think to yourself, I wish I could ask Ingrid or Leslie about something that relates to me, my home, and my situation? I would love a chance to delve deep into a clutter issue that's been stalling me in my decluttering journey. Well, that time has come. For July only, we are offering a one-to-one Declutter Power Up call with one of us for 50% off our normal price. Spaces are limited, so be quick. Go to declutterhub.com/power up and use the coupon code POWER50.
Okay, so welcome back, Marianne. Let's talk about we're going to call it a studio, we're going to call it a workshop. Up to you. What would you like to call it?
Studio. I call it that's what we tend to call it, the studio.
Tell us a little bit about how it came to be the place that it is today.
So I used to have a different studio, which was in a different location. It was 15-minute drive from here. And just for one reason or another, I needed to leave that space. COVID was a big factor in that because I was renting it. And there wasn't a lot of money or business coming in. So it was, cut down the outgoings as lean as possible. And this is a garage. The studio is my parents' garage. And before I moved to the other studio, which was probably 5 years ago, I did do a lot of my work in here, but it was a closed studio. We wouldn't let people in because it was just chaos. So I did the work from here, making up my bouquets and wedding flowers and stuff, but I never hosted anything in here. Whereas the other space, it was a bit more aesthetically pleasing, and I didn't have to have as much stuff in there because most of it was in here. So I started hosting workshops, and I realized I love hosting workshops. It's one of the biggest joys for me in my job. And I would host sort of educational workshops, but also practical workshops, making things, working with flowers. And when I came back to this space, I just thought, well, I don't want to let go of doing that. I don't want to not have a workshop, a people-friendly workshop space. So I knew it needed a good kick up the backside to get it into some shape where I felt like I could invite people here to have, a comfortable, inspirational day. You don't want to pay money and go to a workshop and it be, full of boxes and old charity bags. It's got to serve who you're welcoming in. So that was the mission. We also needed to, I guess it's sort of downsizing. We had 2 fairly large greenhouses and the studio at the other place. And this space was full of, junk. Some of it was junk, but some of it is like an accumulation of 10 years worth of being a florist. You don't just have one jug for a table centre, you need 10, don't you? So there was all that sort of thing. And I'd have clients who wanted a particular type of vase, so I'd buy 10 of them, and then no one else wanted that type of vase, but I'd still keep it because, it's useful and I've spent money on it. So yeah, there were lots of things got brought into here, and they just needed going through, one by one. Is this useful? Do I need 10 of this? Do I need, 18 of this particular type of vessel or whatever? And yeah, it was those decisions that sort of really took up a lot of time, I'd say, getting to where we are now. We also had a window put in. So that was a bit of construction work because it can get quite dark in here. So, we wanted a bit of natural light and then a bit of storage, but actually don't need as much storage as we thought we would, which is quite nice because I've managed to declutter lots of it. So yeah.
As an aside then, when my friend was 60, we went to a floral workshop in Manchester, and it was literally like one of the best days we've ever had as a group of girls. So I know there's not many people listening that are around the corner from Bakewell. to be fair. So if you fancy, coming from all around the world to Marianne's workshops, that would be amazing. But if you do get the opportunity to go to another workshop, because I just thought it was lovely. As I say, I'm not creative at all, but just the way it's explained, and it's like, oh yeah, do you know what I mean? And it was just a really lovely day. It's just a nice vibe. It's nice to be around flowers, isn't it?
I think that's a big thing that I have taken away from a lot of my education. I've had a very creative art education, and it upsets me sometimes to hear like people like you say, oh, I'm not creative. And I think, I may be digressing here, but I think a lot of people have been told they're not creative, and that's not really actually.
I think it's a choice as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I'm creative. I don't think I'm creative in the traditional sense of the word, in kind of arty. Do I think I'm creative? Yeah, we can create a podcast, we can create a membership, we can create a course. And so, I can write an email, all of those things are creative in their own, but actual arts and crafts those kind of thing. It's not my bag. It's not my bag. I just don't really, it's not something that makes me really happy. But on an occasion like that, where it's a kind of a one-off, I couldn't see myself going into a floral course at college or anything, but I loved it as a one-off, and I just thought it was a lovely, lovely vibe. We did a painting class a few weeks ago as well, which was it was called Sip and Paint. And so that was really nice as well. You just go and drink Prosecco and kind of try and pretend to paint. Now, honestly, the flowers were much more successful than painting, I'm not going to lie. But I just think those kind of things are nice things to do. Exactly. Really nice, it's a nice afternoon out, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's what I fell in love with, like people coming in and like you say, oh, I'm not creative, and they come and then you show them how to do the thing that they're doing, and they just come away and they're like, oh, I made this amazing thing. And it's a really like boosting, it's happiness, isn't it? It's a really happy thing to do.
It is. So you say you didn't need much storage, so I'm intrigued now where your stuff is. Where is it?
Stuff is, it's mainly not here anymore. We got rid of an astronomical amount of stuff. Charity shop, going to the dump. I sold some bits on like Facebook Marketplace. A lot of people do their own wedding flowers, and wanted to buy all my jugs and whatever. So it was literally paring down. I don't need 10 of this, like I was saying with somebody wanted 10 of that thing. I was like, well, I've not used it since, I don't need it, I'm probably not going to use it again, so let's get it gone. And then it was the organization that just changed everything. We bought a label maker, we bought stacky boxes, everything's organized now, so it doesn't really take up that much room. It's in sort of there's one main cupboard with everything in, and then the other thing is I quite like to display some of my things. I've got little arrangements here and there. Some of my vessels are quite pretty, so they're out on display, and they're on open shelves. So that wasn't too difficult to sort of work into here. And then because it's a working space, things do move around a lot. So I didn't want loads and loads of big cupboard space around. So it was just a matter of like getting rid of stuff, really.
Do you know what I'm really interested in, Marianne? Because I know that you've done over the past few years, you've done a lot of mindset change. And I think it sounds to me as if it's not so much about the storage and the way that you did that, although that plays a part, of course, in the organisation. It strikes me that when you said, I went out and bought 10, because you probably had a wholesaler that you could buy 10 vases from, it felt like the cost-effective thing to do to buy in bulk. But now it seems perhaps, am I right, that you think, well, this client has asked for this one vase and I'll just go and buy one. Am I right? Or
it's more, you're right, completely right about the mindset thing. I think my mindset has completely changed, and my business model, I guess, has changed in the way that you've got to offer people what you want to do. So if I don't offer that particular type of jug or vase or whatever, then either they need to find a florist who's going to do exactly that, or they can use these nice vases that I already have. And it's sort of making the stuff I do have work harder for me.
Right.
But doing that via the way I present, when I do a mood board or I present to a client, I say, well, you could have this vase or this vase because that's what I've got. Not I'm going to get hold of whatever you want, because then you're sort of they own you a bit more, don't they? They're dictating, which I know especially when it's like wedding clients, of course they should dictate a lot of the stuff, but this is what I have. It's this vase or this vase. If you really, really, really hate this vase or this vase, then go somewhere else.
We talked a lot about perfectionism. So you've allowed your perfectionism to kind of go down a notch for this kind of thing, and say it doesn't need to be absolutely perfect for everything. I can give people choices and they can choose. And ultimately, if they want it to be different, then it can be. And that plays into, because it would be impossible to have everything in your workshop in a small confined space that's going to work for everybody. Exactly. So it seems that everything has sort of come together. And now, so you went through your workshop, made it look beautiful, you got some storage in there, your mindset's changed, you've got less stuff. But obviously flowers and the nature of flowers is quite messy. So how do you make sure? Well, it definitely would be if I was doing it. Maybe it isn't for you, but even when you go into a florist, there's all stuff all over the floor and all that. You're not picking up after yourself every 5 minutes, are you? Every time you trim a stem or whatever. I don't even know what the phrase is. What is the phrase for trimming a stem? I don't know, but whatever. Or do you? Maybe you do. So do you tidy up as you go, or do you tidy up at the end of the day? When do you do your floral workshop resets?
I like to do sort of a smaller reset every day. So, when I finish up today in here, I will sweep the floor and I will, put anything away that I know I'm not going to use tomorrow, say. But then once I've got a wedding this weekend, so once that's delivered and finished, I will come back in here and just make sure everything is back to square one, which is a new thing. It's a completely new concept to me, the reset thing. In previous years, in previous lifetimes, I would just drop tools and just go, because everything was so chaotic. I was like, right, I've got to get here, I've got to do that, and it would just be a mess, and I would leave it until the next time I would need the space. So, and sometimes that wasn't always even the next week, it was 2 weeks, and I'd come back in and I'd have forgotten how much of a mess I'd left it in, and then I'd need to reset it all before I then started work, which would then set me back. And when you're doing things like weddings, it's quite time sensitive, you need to be on it, and I would just be chasing my tail all the time. So now I'm so proud of this space that I never want to leave it in a state I don't wish to find it, I guess, is how I feel about it. And I know lots of people call it different things, like a reset, non-negotiables. I think someone on your podcast called it like a closing ceremony once or something. But I call it doing future Marianne a favour. That's what I'm. And I love that. So I stand here and I'm tired, and I've just delivered a huge wedding, and I want to, go home and go to bed. But actually, I'm like, no, do future Marianne a favour. She will be so grateful for you if you just do this now. And then I do it, and it kind of works. It's like how I talk to myself. But yeah, I mean, florist life is leaves everywhere. There's always leaves all over the floor, and there's absolutely no point picking them up one at a time. You just sort of sweep at the end of the day, or when you can't feel the floor anymore because you're and maybe have a sweep. But yeah, it's not a tidy job, but I think the organization of having boxes with labels, I know where everything is. I used to not know where anything was. I would, I'd lose all my scissors over like a couple of months. I'd have lost all my scissors because I'd, lose one pair, pick up a new pair where I knew they were, and then lose that one. And it would just be endless. And then you'd find 3 different bags with random things in. There's a pair of scissors in here. Like that. That's how my life went. It was like, I guess, you have the phrase of the sweep when someone's coming around for a coffee and you just and put it somewhere. It was like that every time. I would just be like, I need some space. And it'd all go in a box, or it'd all go in a bag or something. And then, a few months later, I'd be like, I'd have 5 minutes to look, and I'd find all these things. And sometimes I'd have rebought them because I couldn't find the first one. So that's like a big waste of money as well, which is not good for a business. Yeah, so it's definitely just a mindset change, isn't it? Like, this isn't working. It's not good for business. It's not good for me. It's not good for future Marianne. So let's just be a bit more disciplined. I think it's the discipline, isn't it? To just like, come on.
You know what? It's just so fantastic to listen to, because actually that transformation has happened over 3 or 4 years. You've worked on it domestically, then let's call it, at home. You've worked on your mindset. It's impacted on your business. You know, those resets are brilliant. And the fact that you recognize what that's going to, you know, spending those extra 5 minutes at the end of the day doing those resets and sorting things out for future Marianne, how that's going to help you. Because it's all about waking up the next day to go into a space, whether that's a kitchen, a bedroom, or a workshop, and being proud of it and enjoying it, and not feeling down and negative emotion coming over you as soon as you've woken up. That's what it's all about. So thank you so much for sharing, Marianne. It's been such a great journey. It's lovely to see. I'm so excited that we were able to help you. You've obviously done all of the hard work, but it's good that we can inspire you a little bit to think about these different parts of your life. And before we go, there's one other little thing that I want to talk about, because a little bird told me that as well as doing all these fantastic things, like changing your mindset, changing your workshop, building your business, doing all these things, you've written a book.
Yeah, I don't know how I did it all at sometimes, but yeah, I've written a book. It's all about growing flowers, which is what I do. I know we're saying florist, but I'm a florist who uses British flowers as well, which is very important to me. So I've written a book, a sort of beginner's guide on how to start growing your own flowers if you want, and a little bit of sort of my workshops, but at home. So there's projects in there of how to do some different floral arrangements as well with your own flowers once you've grown them. Yeah, I'm definitely not sure how I managed to do it all in the last year, but I can definitely say that getting on my decluttering journey just helped so much, like just changed my mind. I know we said mindset a lot, but it's that thing of like being organized, feeling more confident in being more organized makes these goals and these projects actually achievable, rather than just sort of swimming around in chaos, not knowing what you're going to do next week. I really had to make a plan. I had deadlines, you know, big, scary, real deadlines for books. And yeah, just meeting them was made easier by having less stuff. So yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. So before we go, Marianne, do tell us what the name of your book is, because we're going to find it. We need to know what the name of it is.
It's Cut Flower Growing by Marianne Slater. It's available at all good bookshops and Amazon as well. Yes.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you so much. And I know what we've been talking about today is quite visual. So what I'm going to do is I am going to drop some lovely images of your workshop so that anybody who's listening can go and take a look at what it actually looks like. Because I'm sure a lot of people will be like, I want to see what that looks like, that workshop looks like. So that's going to be in the show notes, and you need to go to declutterhub.com/198 to see those show notes. You can see them there. What are we talking about next week? Next week, we are talking about 10 things you need for the perfect declutter. I'm sure Marianne could probably tell you what they are after binging all 197 podcasts. And now you can listen to yourself on 198. How cool is that? Thank you so much for being here, Marianne. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to share your story. Share what I think is transformational, actually. I love the productivity side of it from a business perspective, and I've loved having you as a guest. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to the Declutter Hub podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us in your podcast player so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next week.